There are places in Ontario that simply shouldn't exist. Not just old houses, not just local legends, ancient, impossible structures and unsolved disappearances that the government is actively trying to scrub from the map. And you are walking right past them. Most people think Ontario is just safe suburbs and polite traffic, but there are remote coordinates where the laws of history and physics have been completely ignored. We're talking about a prehistoric quarry that destroyed an archaeologist's career because it proved humans were here 30,000 years early, and a cursed lighthouse where the keeper's bones still surface in the sand. Here's what nobody tells you. Some of these sites are being hidden to prevent looting, while others have literally driven their caretakers into hiding. Most people will miss the warning signs until it's far too late. If you're the type of person who stays up late reading about things that go bump in the woods, and you're brave enough to click that subscribe button before this list gets flagged, welcome to the club. Hit that like button so the algorithm doesn't bury this truth. Let's break it down. Number 1. The Cheguianda Quarry on Manitoulin Island. You can walk on the ground where North American history was fundamentally broken, and it'll cost you absolutely nothing to stand exactly where the experts were proven wrong. Yes, really. No, it's not a conspiracy theory. It's just a really inconvenient truth. Cheguianda, Manitoulin Island. Population sits at a quiet 2,500, tucked away on the largest freshwater island in the world. It's the kind of place where the air smells like ancient pine and the silence is loud enough to give you an existential crisis. On the surface, it's picturesque, rural, and the kind of remote peace that city dwellers pay thousands to visit for a weekend. It's rugged, historic, and wildly mysterious. Let's break it down. Median home price is around $450,000. That's less than a glorified closet in downtown Toronto. Cost of living is 5% below the national average, and rent hovers near $1,600. Sounds like a dream, right? But here's what nobody tells you. The job market is, well, let's just say you better love remote work or fishing. Unemployment dances higher than the national average, and the quarry isn't exactly a bustling economic hub. But then, the twist. The evidence found here suggests humans were chilling in Ontario 30,000 years earlier than what your grade school textbooks claimed. The site was basically buried and ignored to keep the historical timeline neat. As one Reddito put it, I visited and felt like I was standing on the edge of a conspiracy. You look at these tools and you know the history they taught you is a lie. So, what's the actual price? You get unpolluted air and a literal time capsule, but you also get island isolation. You'll save on the mortgage, but you might spend your weekends praying the ferry isn't delayed or that the Wi-Fi gods are smiling. And don't even get me started on the roads. Navigating Manitoulin isn't driving. It's a personality test. You're either stuck behind a tractor or a tourist who's just discovered what a scenic overlook is for the first time. I swear, the island speed limit is more of a vague suggestion, kind of like my last attempt at a diet. Picture this. It's a crisp autumn evening. You're standing on the ridge of the quarry. The sun is painting the sky in violent shades of orange, and you're surrounded by a silence so deep you can hear your own heartbeat. You smell damp earth and approaching rain. It's romantic, it's eerie, and it's beautiful. Then, your phone pings. 0 bars of service. Welcome to reality. And if you think Cheguianda's prehistoric cover-up is wild, wait till you see the next place. It somehow turned a lighthouse into a crime scene that still refuses to stay quiet. Number 2. Gibraltar Point Lighthouse. You can visit Canada's second oldest lighthouse, where the first keeper was murdered and dismembered, and his bones still pop up in the sand. Yes, really. No, it's not just a campfire story. Gibraltar Point, Toronto Islands. Population? Mostly seasonal campers and the occasional brave soul who lives there year-round, just a short ferry ride from the chaotic heartbeat of downtown Toronto. It's the kind of place that feels like a different dimension once the last ferry departs for the night. On the surface, it's a beautiful, windswept shoreline, but there's a persistent, icy stillness to the air that makes you feel like you're being watched from the treeline. It's scenic, isolated, and profoundly unsettling. Let's break it down. Home ownership on the islands is basically a unicorn. You're looking at long-term land leases and scarcity that makes downtown look affordable. Rent is functionally non-existent for the general public, and cost of living is high because you're essentially paying a premium to be trapped on an island. Crime rate? Low, unless you count the alleged spectral activity. Here's the kicker. This site hosted the first recorded murder in Toronto history back in 1815. But here's what nobody tells you. The lighthouse keepers were soldiers, and the murder was allegedly over a bootleg beer operation gone wrong. The perpetrators were never officially convicted, despite a literal jawbone being unearthed in the area years later. And the light? It reportedly still flickers when there's no power. As one Redditor put it, I took the ferry at night and didn't even get close to the lighthouse. The air just changes when you get near those trees. It's not just wind, it's a heavy, suffocating silence. So, what's a real trade-off? You get exclusive, pristine views of the skyline, but you also get the feeling that you're living in a ghost story. You'll save on the stress of city traffic, but you might spend your nights wondering why the floorboards in your cabin are creaking when you're the only one home. And don't even get me started on the parking situation in Toronto. Unless you have a boat or a portal, your car is basically a paperweight in a parking garage on the mainland. I once saw someone circle the ferry terminal for 40 minutes just to pay $30 for the privilege of being late. It's madness. Also, don't get me started on the geese. The islands aren't run by the city. They're run by an organized crime syndicate of geese who will absolutely mug you for a granola bar. Imagine this. It's midnight. A thick, gray fog is rolling off Lake Ontario, swallowing the skyline whole. The only sound is the rhythmic, metallic thud of the old light housing and the distant, mournful cry of a loon. The air smells like wet sand and decay. You're alone, or at least, you hope you are. Then, you hear footsteps crunching on the shells behind you. You turn around, and there's absolutely nothing there. Number 3. The Screaming Tunnel, Niagara Falls. You can walk through a limestone tunnel that stays unnaturally cold year-round, and light a match in the center to hear a ghostly scream. Yes, really. No, it's not a sound effect, and the locals definitely don't laugh when they tell you to stay out after midnight. Niagara Falls, Ontario. Population over 95,000, but most of them are busy avoiding the tourist traps and the sensory overload of Clifton Hill. It's a city split between the neon-soaked insanity of the falls and the quiet, decaying limestone structures tucked away in the backroads. On the surface, it's all fudge shops and Ferris wheels, but move 5 miles away and the vibe shifts into something rural, neglected, and genuinely claustrophobic. It's loud, it's humid, and it's deeply rooted in local folklore that's way darker than the souvenir shops suggest. Here's what you're working with. Median home prices sit around $700,000, and rent is pushing $2,100. That's a lot of cash to be haunted. Cost of living is about 2% above the national average, which is basically the tourist tax you pay just for living near a waterfall. Crime is moderate, but in the tunnel, it feels like the crime rate is 100% supernatural. But here's what nobody tells you. The legend of the girl who died in a fire here isn't just local gossip. People have used high-end audio recorders and capture voices that shouldn't be there. The humidity in this tunnel is so aggressive that your camera lens will fog up before you even hit the halfway point. As one Redditor put it, I lit a match inside, and the flame died instantly. No breeze, no draft, it just vanished. It felt like the air itself was being sucked out of the room. So, what's the emotional cost? You get a thrill, sure, but you might spend your drive home triple-checking your rearview mirror. You'll save on a cinema ticket, but you might spend your next 3 nights unable to sleep without the lights on. And don't even get me started on the Niagara humidity. It's not just warm, it's a physical weight. It's like walking through a damp, heavy wool blanket that's been soaked in river water. You step out of the shower and you're already sweating. And don't get me started on the tourist traffic. Trying to navigate through the sea of poncho-clad visitors just to get to a grocery store requires the patience of a saint and the defensive driving skills of a getaway driver. Picture this. It's midnight. The humidity is so thick you can taste the mist from the falls. You're standing in the mouth of the limestone tunnel, your flashlight beam cutting through the damp darkness. It smells like wet concrete and ozone. Everything is dead silent. Then, a faint, rhythmic scratching starts on the walls. You realize you didn't bring enough matches to finish the walk. At least at Gibraltar Point, you had the lake breeze to clear your head. Here, The walls are closing in, and the air is just wrong. Number 4. The Moonbeam UFO Landing Pad. You can visit the only official, government-sanctioned extraterrestrial landing site in Canada. Yes, really. No, it's not a joke. The town actually put it on the budget. Moonbeam, Ontario. Population: a cozy 1,200 souls way up in the Cochrane district, miles from anywhere you'd call civilized. It's the kind of place where the map ends and the boreal forest begins. On the surface, it's a quiet, frozen outpost, but the vibe is Twin Peaks meets the X-Files. It's isolated, freezing, and weirdly obsessed with things not from this world. Here's what you're working with. Median home prices are a steal at around $250,000. Rent? You're lucky to find any. Cost of living is low, but your heating bill will absolutely wreck your finances come winter. Crime is practically non-existent, unless you count the local sheriff's casual dismissal of lights in the sky. Translation: you're paying for solitude, but you might get a little more solitude than you bargained for. But here's what nobody tells you. The landing pad isn't just a tourist kitsch project. It was built following a series of genuinely unexplained sightings in the 90s that left local radio equipment fried and the town terrified. As one Reddito put it, it's easy to laugh at the landing pad until you're driving down Highway 11 at 3 a.m. and the radio starts broadcasting voices in a language that definitely isn't French or English. So, what's the real trade-off? You get dirt-cheap real estate, but you also get 6 months of pitch-black, sub-zero isolation. You'll save on the stress of city life, but you might spend your evenings staring at the stars, praying they stay where they are. And don't even get me started on the bugs. We're talking about black flies the size of small drones that will personally hunt you down. It's like living in a nature documentary where you're the main course. And don't get me started on the Wi-Fi. If you're trying to stream anything out here, you better have a satellite dish the size of a billboard and a lot of patience. Picture this. It's a moonless night in February. The temperature is hovering at a balmy minus 30 degrees Celsius. You're standing on the concrete landing pad. The air is so cold it burns your lungs, and the silence is so heavy it feels like pressure in your ears. It smells like pine needles and absolute zero. You look up, and the northern lights are dancing, but then you notice something moving against the stars, something that isn't drifting with the wind. At least the screaming tunnel had the decency to stay in one place. Up here in Moonbeam, the mystery doesn't just sit in a tunnel, it moves. Number 5. The Serpent Mounds. You can stand atop a massive, winding earthwork that spans over 180 feet. And no, the archaeologists still don't have a solid answer for who built it or why. Yes, really. No, it's not just a pile of dirt. Rice Lake, Ontario. Population is scattered, but it's the spiritual heart of the Kawarthas. It's the kind of place where the water is dark, the forests are ancient, and you get the distinct feeling that you're trespassing on something much older than the province itself. On the surface, it's a serene lakeside retreat, but there's a heavy, solemn atmosphere that settles in your chest the moment you pull into the park. It's tranquil, historic, and deeply, unnervingly mysterious. Here's what you're working with. Median home prices near the lake hover around $650,000, and rent is basically whatever the local cottage owners decide to charge you for the season. Cost of living is standard for the region, but your peace of mind? That's the real currency. Crime is non-existent, unless you count the desecration of the mounds by curious tourists. Here's the kicker. This site is considered one of the most sacred and unexplained earthworks in North America. But here's what nobody tells you. The mounds were constructed with a precision that aligns with specific celestial events, yet they date back to a time when mainstream science says people shouldn't have had that level of astronomical knowledge. As one Reddito put it, I walked the length of the serpent at sunset, and honestly, it felt like the ground was vibrating. My compass started spinning, and I got out of there as fast as I could. So, what's the real trade-off? You get unparalleled access to a site of global significance, but you also get the creeping suspicion that you're being watched by something unseen. You'll save on the cost of a museum ticket, but you might spend your nights wondering why the local wildlife suddenly goes dead silent when you walk near the mound. And don't even get me started on the bugs. The mosquitoes near Rice Lake have an ego the size of the serpent itself. I'm talking about prehistoric level swarms that don't care about your $20 bug spray. It's like they've been guarding the mounds for 1,000 years and they're not about to let you enjoy a picnic. And don't get me started on the lack of cell service. You lose connection, and suddenly you're in a different century. Picture this. It's dusk. The mist is rising off Rice Lake like the breath of a giant. You're walking the spine of the earthwork, and the smell of damp cedar and ancient moss is overwhelming. You hear a low, rhythmic thumping that sounds like a drum, but there's no one else in the park. You stop moving, and the sound stops too. You're alone, but you don't feel like it. At least the UFO landing pad and moonbeam gave you a concrete slab to stand on. Here, the ground itself feels like it's waiting for something to wake up. Number 6. The Kenrican Hotel in Kenora, famously known as the Bucket of Blood. You can stand in a hotel lobby where the floorboards are said to be permanently stained with a history of violence that no amount of industrial cleaner can erase. Yes, really. No, it's not a film set. The locals still whisper about it like it happened yesterday. Kenora, Ontario. Population around 15,000, sitting pretty on the Lake of the Woods. It's the kind of place that looks like a postcard from the deck of a boat, but the history of the town's waterfront hotels is straight out of a noir nightmare. On the surface, it's a bustling hub for summer cottagers and boaters, but peel back the veneer and you'll find a rugged, hard-drinking history that never quite died out. It's scenic, resilient, and deeply, violently haunted. Here's what you're working with. Median home prices sit around $400,000, and rent is surprisingly accessible if you don't mind older builds. Cost of living is standard for Northern Ontario, but your soul? That's the tax. Crime in the downtown core is higher than the national average. It's gritty, real, and unapologetic. Translation: you're living in a town where the past literally won't stay buried. But here's what nobody tells you. The Bucket of Blood wasn't just a nickname for a bar. It was a reputation earned through decades of brawls, stabbings, and unexplained disappearances. The legends say that no matter how many times they renovated or painted, the stains on the original would always bled through. As one local posted, you go into some of those old buildings in Kenora and the air just feels thick, like you're walking through layers of everyone else's bad decisions. So, what's the real trade-off? You get incredible lake views and a tight-knit community, but you also get a town that carries its trauma on its sleeve. You'll save on the cost of living, but you might spend your evenings wondering if the stories about the hotel are just legends or if the building itself is just tired of keeping secrets. And don't even get me started on the bugs. In the summer, the black flies in Kenora don't just bite, they draft a legal document for the right to your skin. And don't get me started on the roads leading into town. If you're driving in from the west at night, the stretch of highway feels like it goes on forever, and the lack of lights makes it feel like you're driving straight into a void. It's enough to make you pray for a broken-down car just for the company. Picture this. It's midnight in mid-July. You're walking past the old hotel site. The lake is dead calm and black as ink, and the only sound is the distant, haunting howl of a timber wolf. The air smells like pine, damp wood, and something metallic, almost like old copper. You glance at the foundation, and for a second, the moonlight makes it look like the concrete is weeping. You blink, it's gone, but the shiver down your spine? That stays. At least the serpent mounds at Rice Lake felt ancient and divine. This feels distinctly, grubbily human. Number 7. The Hawkesbury Lagoon. You can walk along the edge of a water system where locals claim the fog isn't weather. It's something trying to mimic the shape of the people who went missing there. Yes, really. No, it's not a prank. And the local police have a disturbing number of unresolved files regarding this specific stretch of water. Hawkesbury, Ontario. Population around 10,000, nestled right on the border of Ontario and Quebec along the Ottawa River. It's the kind of town that looks like a sleepy industrial hub on the surface, but the riverfront has a way of swallowing sound. On the surface, it's a typical bilingual town with decent pizza and quiet streets, but the lagoon area has a heavy, oppressive vibe that hits you before you even get out of your car. It's industrial, overlooked, and genuinely unnerving. Here's what you're working with. Median home prices sit comfortably around $375,000. Rent is affordable, usually hovering around $1,400. Cost of living is actually quite low compared to Ottawa, but you pay for it in that weird, creeping feeling that the river is watching you. Crime is generally low, but the disappearance rate near the water is a statistic nobody in the town office wants to discuss. But here's what nobody tells you. The lagoon is part of a complex system where the current is deceptively strong and prone to swirling in ways that shouldn't happen. People have reported hearing their own names being called from the middle of the reeds. As one local posted, "I grew up near the lagoon and we were strictly forbidden from going near the water after dusk. My grandfather didn't explain why. He just told me, the water doesn't like to be looked at." So, what's the real trade-off? You get a very affordable lifestyle right on the water, but you also get a lingering sense of unease that never quite goes away. You'll save thousands on your mortgage, but you might spend your nights wondering why the reflection in your window looks like it's standing a second behind you. And don't even get me started on the bugs. The mosquitoes here aren't insects, they're an airborne tax on your sanity. And don't get me started on the road infrastructure. If you're trying to navigate the construction near the river, you'll spend more time sitting in your car questioning your life choices than you will actually getting to your destination. It's like the town's way of keeping you trapped in the danger zone just a little longer. Picture this. It's a humid Tuesday evening. The sun is setting behind a refinery, casting long, oily shadows over the lagoon. The water is perfectly still, reflecting the gray sky like a polished mirror. You hear a splash, a big one, but there are no fish in this part of the lagoon. You look out, expecting to see a log, but there's only a ripple spreading out, and for a split second, it looks like a hand reaching up. At least the bucket of blood in Kenora had a clear history of violence to blame. Here, there is no explanation, just an empty space where something used to be. Number 8. The Mines of Cobalt. You can walk through a town where the ground beneath your feet is essentially Swiss cheese, and the tunnels are so unstable that entire sections of the downtown core are slowly being swallowed by the earth. Yes, really. No, it's not a myth. The town's own mapping shows unstable zones right under residential streets. Cobalt, Ontario. Population just over 1,000, clinging to life in the Temiskaming district. It's the kind of place that was once the richest mining town in Canada, but now it feels like a movie set for a disaster film that never finished shooting. On the surface, it's a beautiful, hilly town with stunning architecture, but the vibe is decaying wealth. It's scenic, historic, and profoundly fragile. Here's what you're working with. Median home prices are a shocking $200,000. You could buy a house for the price of a used SUV. Rent is almost non-existent because, well, who wants to rent a place that might sink? Cost of living is rock bottom, but your insurance premiums? Let's just say they're an absolute nightmare. Crime is low, but the structural integrity of your basement, that's the real threat. But here's what nobody tells you. The town is built over thousands of miles of abandoned silver mine shafts, many of which were never properly capped. Some locals claim they can hear the muffled sound of drilling at 3 a.m. As one Reddito put it, "I bought a house there for $150,000, and the first time I heard the earth settle under my foundation, I didn't sleep for a week." The town is literally breathing. So, what's the real trade-off? You get a historic home for pennies, but you also get the constant, low-level anxiety that your living room might become a sinkhole. You'll save on the mortgage, but you might spend your days wondering if that crack in the drywall is just old house charm or a sign that the mining shafts are calling. And don't even get me started on the roads. The streets in Cobalt are basically just thin ribbons of asphalt laid over thin air. You drive over a pothole, and you don't just feel a bump. You feel a hollow echo that makes you pray your suspension is made of titanium. And don't get me started on the lack of modern amenities. The Wi-Fi is spotty at best, and the nearest real store is a 40-minute drive through dense, unforgiving wilderness. Picture this. It's a quiet Sunday morning. You're in your kitchen, drinking coffee, and you hear a long, slow groan coming from beneath the floorboards. It's not wood stretching, it's rock shifting deep underground. You look at your coffee mug, and the liquid is rippling in perfect, concentric circles. It smells like damp limestone and cold, metallic dust. You aren't just living on land, you're living on a suspended ceiling. At least at the Hawkesbury Lagoon, you could choose not to go near the water. Here, the danger is in your living room. If you thought a town built on a death trap was terrifying, wait until you see the next place. It's a stretch of coastline where people don't just go missing. They report seeing lights that lure them into the dense, dark woods of the Bruce Peninsula. Number 9. The Bruce Peninsula. You can drive down the darkest stretch of highway in the province and see floating, multicolored orbs that chase your vehicle before vanishing into the tree line. Yes, really. No, it's not your high beams reflecting. The local paramedics have actually documented calls about unidentified airborne targets for decades. The Bruce, Ontario. Population is sparse and scattered, turning into a tourist frenzy in the summer and a frozen, abandoned wasteland in the winter. It's the kind of place where the geography is stunning. Turquoise waters, jagged cliffs, but the forest is so dense it feels like it's swallowing the road. On the surface, it's a hiker's paradise, but the vibe shifts at night into something cold, isolating, and downright hostile. It's breathtaking, unforgiving, and deeply, unnervingly weird. Here's what you're working with. Median home prices are inflated by the cottage life craze, often hitting $800,000 plus. Rent is basically a myth unless you're a seasonal worker living in a bunkhouse. Cost of living is high because you're paying for the view, but the crime rate is negligible, unless you count the sheer number of people who get lost in the woods and are never seen again. Translation: you're paying a premium to be at the mercy of the wilderness. But here's what nobody tells you. The ghost lights aren't a new phenomenon. They've been recorded since the early 1900s. They don't just appear, they follow you. As one local posted, "My dad was driving near Tobermory when a blue orb started pacing the car. He accelerated to 120 and it stayed glued to the passenger window, silent, until he hit the town lights. He never went back out at night after that." So, what's the real trade-off? You get access to Canada's most beautiful shorelines, but you also get a deep, primal fear of the dark. You'll save on the stress of the city, but you might spend your nights triple-locking your door because the woods outside your windows sound way too busy. And don't even get me started on the winter isolation. When the snow hits, the Bruce Peninsula becomes a frozen trap. The roads are white-out nightmares where you can't tell where the pavement ends and the cliff begins. And don't get me started on the lack of medical support. If you have an emergency out here, you're basically on your own until a helicopter can find a gap in the trees. It's not just rural. It's practically lawless when the weather turns. Picture this. It's 2 a.m. You're driving home on a winding, single-lane road. The fog is so thick your headlights are just bouncing back at you. Suddenly, you see a flicker in the rear view, a bright, pulsating violet light that's gaining on you, silently. You smell ozone, sharp and electric, and the hair on your arm stands straight up. You try to speed up, but your engine starts sputtering, and the light just stops, hovering 10 feet off your bumper. At least the mines in Cobalt gave you a warning groan before the earth shifted. Out here, the mystery just hunts you down. Number 10. The Hagues Road, or as the locals call it, the Devil's Highway. You can drive down a stretch of road so notoriously haunted that professional truckers often refuse to take it alone at night, and the legends of what lurks in the ditch are the single most terrifying stories in the province. Yes, really. No, this isn't just a campfire tale. The police blotter here is weirdly full of unexplained vehicle stalling calls. Hagues Road, near Strathroy, Ontario. Population: a handful of farmers and the restless spirits of whoever didn't make it to the other side. It's a nondescript, lonely gravel stretch that cuts through dense, overgrown farmland. On the surface, it's just a shortcut. At night, the vibe is suffocating, isolating, and downright predatory. It's quiet, it's rural, and it's arguably the most evil-feeling 10 kilometers in Ontario. Here's what you're working with. Median home prices in the area are rural standard, maybe $500,000 for a farmhouse, but you couldn't pay me to own a property facing this road. Rent is negligible. Crime is low, but the incident reports, they're a different story. Translation: you're living in a town where even the GPS seems to want to avoid this specific route. But here's what nobody tells you. The road is famous for the shadow man who steps out in front of cars, and the red-eyed dog that reportedly runs alongside vehicles at 80 kilometers per hour. As one local posted, "I've lived here 40 years. I've seen the dog twice. Both times, my engine died, the headlights cut out, and I had to sit in pitch darkness while something heavy paced around my truck for 10 minutes. So, what's the real trade-off? You get the ultimate small-town privacy, but you also get a permanent, cold knot in your stomach every time you have to drive home after dark. You'll save on the cost of living, but you might spend your nights wondering if that tapping on your bedroom window is a branch or a claw. And don't even get me started on the road maintenance. It's barely a road, more like a jagged scar in a landscape. If your car breaks down here, you aren't just calling for a tow, you're praying for a miracle because the reception in the hollows is non-existent. And don't get me started on the bugs. In the summer, the swarms are so thick you can't see the road through your windshield. It's like the earth itself is trying to keep you from passing through. Picture this. It's 3 a.m. The moon is hidden behind thick clouds. You're driving slow, the gravel crunching loudly under your tires. Suddenly, your radio starts emitting a high-pitched, rhythmic static that sounds suspiciously like a human heartbeat. You smell something rotten, like wet fur and old copper. You look into the side mirror, and you see two glowing, amber pinpricks sitting just at the edge of the tree line. You don't look back. You just drive. At least at the Bruce Peninsula, you had the stars to guide you. Here, the road is a dead end for your peace of mind. If you made it through all 10 of these, congratulations. You've seen the side of Ontario that the travel brochures are terrified to print. Which one of these would you actually visit? Comment below, and don't forget to subscribe. We're hunting the next set of mysteries as we speak. Stay safe out there. You're going to need it.